Ну, мне тоже страшно. Только не кусайся, хорошо? Я как бы положительный персонаж. Так. Иди сюда. Но не получается, ты же уже поняла. Иди сюда, иди. Не бойся. Чуть-чуть. Все. Давай. Легенькая. До этого еще тяжеленная была. Ну тихо, не нервничай. Зрелище, конечно, страшное. На самом деле они кричат, плачут. Меня не кусануло. Вот так, раз. Вторую петлю давай. Все, смотри, она катается. Блин, она... Замерзаешь, да? Да? Коська. Ты еще и скользкая. Ну все, тут уже встанешь. Иди.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 3rd of December. I'm Méabh Mc Mahon, and this is Europe Today, Euronews' daily live fix of European news and analysis. Coming up today, red cheeks here in Brussels. The EU Foreign Affairs headquarters, the EEAS and the College of Europe in Bruges were raided yesterday by police. The former EU Foreign Affairs chief, Federica Mogherini, and other top officials are now in custody as part of a probe into alleged fraud. For more on this developing story that came as a big shock to many here in Brussels, we're joined here on set by Euronews' EU editor, Maria Tadeo. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning.
Tell us, what do we know so far?
Well, look, it's a bombshell, as you say, in Brussels, and also, I would argue, even European diplomatic circles because of the allegations, but also the people allegedly involved, the faces of it. Federica Mogherini, as you say, she was a former High Representative for the EU under the Juncker Commission, so that is the top European diplomat at the time. Stefano Sannino, who has also been detained for questioning. He's a top-tier civil servant who still works at the European Commission, and a third individual connected to the College of Europe, which is an educational institution very connected to the EU too. So in terms of the allegations, yesterday the European Public Prosecutor's Office, assisted by the Belgian police, searched the premises of the External Action Service. That is, in very simple terms, a sort of foreign office for the EU and the College of Europe. What they believe, and again these are allegations at this point still, is that there is enough evidence to suspect that there was fraudulent behavior when it comes to a contract that was tendered by the External Action Service to the College of Europe related to the establishment of a diplomatic academy. Now, what they argue is that fraudulent behavior may be extended or as a result of a heads up that the College of Europe got before the tender was public, and obviously that gave them an advantage over the rivals. That is the center of the allegations at this point. I should note we have not been able to reach out for comment to Federica Mogherini or Stefano Sannino, and of course this is an ongoing investigation and they have not been charged yet, but they are detained for questioning.
And of course Federica Mogherini is very well known here in diplomatic circles, but just remind our viewers in case they're not so sure and they don't remember her.
Absolutely. And look, this is an Italian politician. She was a former foreign minister under the Matteo Renzi government, extremely well connected in European circles. Again, she was a top diplomat for Juncker and then became the rector of the College of Europe. And just to put life outside of the European bubble and the Brussels bubble, the College of Europe is an institution which is seen as a sort of gateway, as a path to a golden ticket to get a top European civil servant job. Of course, this is an institution that sometimes really fast tracks careers. And in Brussels, you know this very well, Maeve, it's about the people that you know, the connections that you know, the Rolodex. It's a town that, in a way, it's a very small circle. Of course, being well connected, it's not a crime, it's not illegal, but the question obviously is, what do you do with those connections?
Indeed. Maria Tadeo, Euronews' EU editor, thank you so much for those details, and of course for more on that fast moving story, do keep an eye on Euronews.com. But now, coming up, we'll be joined by the 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics winner, the French economist Philippe Aghion. Known for spearheading the theory of innovation-driven growth and creative destruction, he's a professor at the Collège de France and is the chair of Innovation and Growth at INSEAD Business School. Good morning, Professor, and congratulations on your prestigious win, and of course to your co-winners. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being with you.
Look, you advocate for this idea of creative destruction, a concept that could alarm our viewers this morning. Just remind us what exactly it is.
Creative destruction is the process whereby new innovations displace old technologies. So the new replaces the old. And progress has always gone through. You know, when you invented the computer, the typewriter became obsolete. And, you know, we keep the new continuously replaces the old.
And you see innovation as a means to sustain long-term economic growth. How can the EU copy and paste this thinking?
Well, the EU, there is not enough creative destruction in the EU because, you know, for example, in the US, if you look at the 5 most innovating firms in the US nowadays, they are not the same as they were 25 years ago. In the EU, they are essentially the same, because we remain stuck in mid-tech incremental innovation, whereas they do much more breakthrough high-tech innovation in the US and even in China now. So EU is lagging behind China and the US when it comes to breakthrough frontier innovation.
And that's what Mario Draghi, of course, warned in his report. He called it a wake-up call for the EU. So how can we prevent the slow agony, to quote Mario Draghi?
I think you need first, you know, a true single market for goods and services, because when you do a big innovation, you want a big market. And also with a big market, with a single market, you have more competition, and competition boosts frontier innovation. I innovate to escape competition with you. So you need a single market. We don't have that. Each country, in each member state adds its own regulation to the European regulation. We call that gold plating. The second thing is that you need a good financial ecosystem of innovation. Venture capital, institutional investors like pension funds, mutual funds. We don't have enough of those. And those, they induce risk-taking because, you know, in Europe, we don't take enough risk. We don't, you know, forgive short-term failure. You know, to innovate breakthrough, you need to tell people, no problem if you fail. We encourage you to fail because if you fail, it's that you tried. And we don't have financial institutions that encourage risk-taking sufficiently. And the third thing, we don't have anything like the DARPA, this modern way to do industrial policy. You see that the pro-competition way, they did that for defense and space in the US, DARPA. They did that for vaccines, it was the BARDA. We don't have anything equivalent in Europe. In Europe, in the name of competition policy, we precluded industrial policy.
But what about people who fear change, they fear technology, they're afraid of the future, especially with AI developments as well?
You see what I mean? Europe is a regulatory giant and a budgetary dwarf. We regulate too much and we don't invest enough.
Indeed, and that's why they always say that here we regulate, in China they replicate, and of course in the United States they innovate.
They more than replicate now in China. They now are a frontier. They became frontier innovation. They are ahead of us in several technologies. And the problem is that Europe is declining when it comes to frontier innovation. China is rising and the US is above. And that's where we need to wake up.
But there's a drive, of course, in Brussels now to simplify. That is the word of the day. Do you welcome this? And how do you find the balance?
We have too many regulations. I think we need regulation. For example, on AI, with too many regulations. And regulation discourages new firms. Large incumbent firms can cope with regulation. New entrants are discouraged by regulation. So we need to regulate, but we over-regulate in Europe. That's the problem. That's a big barrier. And so we need that's something we need to work on, particularly for AI. If we want to, to harness the AI revolution, that's what we need to do. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Philippe Aghion, thank you so much for speaking to us here this morning on Europe Today from Paris.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
But bye-bye. But now, back here in Brussels, NATO foreign ministers are gathering to discuss a US-led peace plan for Ukraine. But their American counterpart, Marco Rubio, is not around the table. This after Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner concluded talks in Moscow yesterday. For more, we can go straight over to the headquarters of NATO outside Brussels and bring in Euronews' correspondent Shona Murray. Good morning, Shona. Great to have you with us. How can ministers discuss a US plan, Shona, without Ukraine around the table and, of course, without the US Secretary of State around the table?
Well, of course, here at this NATO Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting, there is that question outstanding, even though NATO officials have been playing it down. But at the same time, we know that these discussions with Russia, with Ukraine, the United States have deep consequence for the fate of the European continent and NATO. And you'd imagine that Secretary of State Marco Rubio would use this opportunity to debrief his 31 allies. Now, listening and speaking to some foreign affairs ministers this morning, they're saying that they really don't have a huge amount of confidence that Russia is genuinely coming to the table to end the war in Ukraine. But at the same time, some are saying it is crunch time. Now, we know that obviously Europe is also paying the heavier burden when it comes to military support for Ukraine. So you'd imagine that Marco Rubio could be here. So it is an outstanding issue. One diplomat told me last night that essentially if Marco Rubio doesn't come to the next 2 NATO meetings, they would be worried. But for the moment, they're not going to take too much concern on it. Now, one of the other issues on the agenda today, which is quite unusual for a NATO Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting, is the issue of frozen Russian assets across Europe and across the world. We know that Belgium here has the highest amount, about 180 billion, but they're also in France, the UK and Canada. So there'll be a discussion about what should be done with these frozen Russian assets, because there was concerns that the US might want to use them. Should they be taken and then used and given to Ukraine for reconstruction? And I caught up with the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, and she told me that this is certainly something that Canada is looking at.
We are looking at all ways in which we can support Ukraine. For example, we have sanctioned over 4,000 or so entities and organizations that are of Russian origin, as well as individuals, and we are continually looking for different ways to put pressure on Russia.
Anita Anand there, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs. And meanwhile, Shona, Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary-General, he told the press this week there was nothing to worry about. Is he just trying to keep in President Trump's good books, do you think?
Well, I think he's trying to ensure that there's no panic. But if you hear what Mark Rutte has said in the past, remember, he said things like, if Europe doesn't invest now heavily in defence, we may as well all start learning Russian. So sometimes he can also be panic-stricken himself. But I think you're right. He does spend a lot of time trying to placate Donald Trump to ensure that he remains a steadfast member of the NATO alliance, because without the United States, there is no North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. So that is a crucial part of his role as Secretary General, and I think that's why people believe that the NATO summit in July, which moved member states to pay 5% on defence, that was so successful is because he was managed to keep Donald Trump on side. So that is part of it. But like I said to you earlier, the discussion here is that the talks at the moment are at crunch time, but at the same time, people are quite sceptical that we've been here before with Russia and that there's no evidence in any way that Russia wants to end the war in Ukraine without its maximalist positions being materialised. Maeve?
OK, thank you so much, Shona Murray, there for that live update from the NATO headquarters. And a press conference, of course, is scheduled for later this afternoon, and we will keep you updated on that. But moving on, scientists and NGOs are furious with the European Commission for considering gas pipelines as legitimate for EU climate funding. Our reporters Jakob Yanis and Maria Tadeo have been taking a look.
How do we power our lifestyle? For our cars, homes and factories, we need to slash high bills and break free from Russian gas. Hydrogen is sold as the magic answer, and the EU is betting big on it. The European Commission just announced a list of 235 energy projects eligible for fast-track funding. 100 of them are for hydrogen projects, with an estimated total investment budget of 80 billion euros. These funds are meant for the energy transition. But there is a catch. Critics warn that 90% of these hydrogen projects were submitted by gas operators. They worry the EU might be financing hydrogen-ready pipes that will actually carry dirty fossil gas for years, because the green supply simply isn't there yet. That could be seen purely as greenwashing. Ideally, we want green hydrogen. made cleanly from water and renewable electricity. However, today, most hydrogen is grey, made from fossil gas in a process that pumps tons of CO2 into the air. The €80 billion question is this: are we building a bridge to a greener future, or just a lifeline for the gas industry?
Jakub Janis and Marta Pacheco there. And by the way, the European Commission will present a new proposal to simplify environmental legislation this Wednesday, so we will keep an eye on that too. But this brings this Wednesday's edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in, and come back again tomorrow morning. I'll be joined here in the studio by the Executive Vice President of the European Commission. That's the Romanian politician Roxana Mințatu. See you then. Take care.
Decision-making is crucial in businesses.
The cloud spending will surpass the $1 trillion mark in Europe.
You have to love the problem.
Making equity great again.
I don't believe in digitalizing for the sake of digitalization.
AI is a new power, a new capability.
We speak to some of the brightest minds in industry to address the key topics on the business agenda.
Euronews. World weather.